Such a simple two-syllable clip, but for many, hearing this upbeat utterance back in the day meant you were ready for the most awesomest, radicalist gaming experience of your life up to that point. It was a warning that you were about to witness blistering speeds powered by blast processing, a term which basically meant nothing but sounded epic. It meant you were too cool to bother with a slow, boring plumber who can't even manage a light jog, let alone speeds of Mach 5. Sadly, it also meant you were playing on borrowed time, with a console star that would fade out far too soon than it should have done. From humble beginnings in the 1940s as a supplier of coin-operated amusements and jukeboxes to military bases, that's actually true, Service Games, aka SEGA, fully entered the gaming industry in the 80s and took on Nintendo in the 90s, before the impressive Dreamcast was all but shunned by the new millennium. But hold off on the sad music, because it's not all depressing retrospectives here. The 30th anniversary of the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you want to get serious about this, has resulted in the release of a rather wonderful Mega Drive/Genesis Mini. Hooray! Incidentally, we've ranked all 64 of its games in another list which you should definitely check out. But not yet. Finish this video first. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 things you didn't know about Sega. Number 10. Alex Kidd and Other Murdered Mascots. It's understandable to think that Sonic was the first and only mascot for Sega. Understandable, but wrong. Don't worry though, because the first official face of Sega, Alex Kidd, isn't exactly a household name. Okay, technically, a sentient spaceship called Opa Opa from arcade and Master System title Fantasy Zone could be classed as the first official mascot, but since when can a boring hunk of metal have a personality? Oh yeah. The bizarre simian-human mashup that was Mr. Kidd first appeared in Alex Kidd in Miracle World in 1986, and the money-pilfering humanoid made the Master System his own, with 4 more games on the platform. However, with just one title on the Mega Drive and a certain speedy spiny boy racing into top billing, he just kind of faded away. Another face of Sega was Sagata Sanshiro, the star of Japanese Sega Saturn adverts. This frankly terrifying individual would fight youths, scare children who were expecting Santa, and cheat at baseball, all with a very aggressive message to play Sega Saturn now! Rather than fading away though, this shouty showman bowed out in style by saving the Dreamcast launch from a rocket strike before exploding in space. Probably what he would have wanted, I guess. Number 9. Weird consoles, controllers, and peripherals. Nintendo might be the kings of weird, unnecessary peripherals now, but they're a mere shadow of the once glorious Sega empire, built upon mountains of strange tat. The Mega Drive featured plenty of alternative reduxes, with 5 official variations in North America alone. But by the mid-90s, Sega opened the gates for third-party companies to start producing their own Mega Drive creations. There was the Megatech arcade unit, the Sega equivalent of a CD Mega Changer, the portable Megajet for all your in-flight entertainment needs, and the snappily named Aiwa CDS GM1, a Mega Drive fused with a boombox sound system. Rad. Then, to top it all, there were a whole bunch of insane peripherals to attach to these wacky consoles. Highlights include the Maraca controllers for Dreamcast Samba de Amiga, the Sega Activator with its motion control octagon, the Train Sim controller for Densha de Go, and a full-body feedback vest called the Aura Interactor. Even the main Dreamcast controller had another controller in it, with a unique VMU working as a memory card and handheld mini-console with its own games. A controller that's also a handheld? That sounds familiar, but we can't quite place... Oh, Nintendo! Number 8. Made from apples and Game Boys. game companies who still build their own hardware from scratch are playing a mugs game. It's all about finding pre-built parts to keep hardware costs down, so you're not operating at a $4 billion loss per console generation. Microsoft. Sorry. Nintendo, the clever little sausages, have been doing this for a while, but credit also goes to Sega, who utilized off-the-shelf parts for the Mega Drive, using Nintendo's own tactic to chip away at their dominance. The main processor for the Mega Drive was the Motorola 68000, which was already a 5-year-old component in Apple Macintosh computers. And this ripe old age worked in the Mega Drive's benefit, as it made it much easier for developers to work with, tempting big names like EA, who were fed up with all the obtuse development doohickeys of more complicated machines. Sega also managed another subtle techie-based dig at Nintendo by using the Zilog 780 sound architecture, a component that had been around since the 70s, and one also used in the Nintendo Game Boy. Ha! Sick nerd burn, Sega. Got him, and so on. Number 7, the Mega Drive pioneered the release date. Tuesdays. Such a nothing day apart from the excellent streams from TripleJump's own Ben Potter at 3 to 5 PM BST on twitch.tv/Team TripleJump. And of course, 2 for Tuesdays, which produces streams of its own the following morning. But otherwise, Tuesdays are definitely boring. So, which time-meddling troublemaker made Tuesday the conventional release day for new video game titles? Could it be Sega? Yeah, that would make sense given the title of the video. It all stems from a good old-fashioned calendar-based marketing stunt. Before 1992, game releases were a wild west of random times, often not even coordinated for the same day store to store. Retailers would just start selling a game whenever they got them in stock, but all that changed with the release of Sonic 2, which not only had a uniform release date, but was shrewdly marketed as Sonic Tuesday, coming out the Tuesday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving and the biggest shopping day of the American calendar. As a result, we now have far more coordinated release days in general, and over in the States, there is a tendency to still release games on Tuesdays specifically, unless they're delayed for a Tuesday the following year. Yay. Number 6, the disastrous 32X add-on. One of the many flashpoints between Sega of Japan and Sega of America came with the demand for a sort of transitional console add-on to bridge the gap between the Mega Drive and the upcoming Saturn. In the early 90s, Sega Japan were struggling to compete in Nintendo's home turf, so CEO Hayao Nakayama pushed for a brand new console in 1994 to come out before the Saturn. Sega of America, meanwhile, was still having a lovely time of it sales-wise, so they saw no point in ruining the formula. But since the console wars were an unforgiving bit measuring contest back then, they needed a contender ASAP. So the result was the 32X add-on, a rather ungraceful looking plugin that grew out of your existing Mega Drive like an irradiated mutation. Dubbed Project Mars, it offered 2 32-bit processors, a 3D graphics processor, and, well, fewer than 40 games in its whole lifetime. That's a shame. A shortage of processors, the same chips used in the Saturn, also delayed the launch of the 32X until after the Japanese release of the Saturn, which kind of defeated the point in the 32X add-on in the first place, being a transition. What? Who did? What? It was all a bit of a disaster, really, and not the last time that Sega would trip over their own shoelaces. Number 5, Sega versus Sega. The self-sabotage that occurred with the 32X debacle was just the start of major beef between Sega's Japan and US divisions. Scott Bayless, senior producer at Sega of America from 1990 to 1994, even said that working there at the time felt like watching the death of the Hindenburg in slow motion. Oh, the humanity! Sega of Japan were very traditional and begrudged the success of their edgier American cousins, apparently. In the mid-90s, former Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske witnessed what he deemed the, quote, stupidest decision ever made in the history of business, that being Japan's refusal to approve a deal with Sony for a joint console production. And following this, Sega's first major coffin nail was hammered in with the notorious 1995 E3 announcement of the Sega Saturn costing $100 more than the PlayStation and rushed out before a killer Sonic title. To Sega of Japan, US CEO Kalinske was basically the villain, upsetting classic industry values with his reckless Western ways, an idea taken all too literally with this next gem. Number 4, SEGAGAGA. I'm your biggest fan, I'll follow you until you love me. Having absolutely nothing to do with the similarly named and strangely clothed female pop star, Part 3 of the Clash of the Cultures between Sega Japan and Sega US involves one of the strangest titles to be released on the Dreamcast. No mean feat for the platform that hosted Space Channel 5 and Seaman. But the 2001 Japan-only game SEGAGAGA, an RPG where you control a game developer at Sega, holds the unique honour of being both ahead of its time as a satirical view on the industry and a sad reminder of the company's downfall. This Sega simulator was set in the distant year of 2025, where Sega owns only a 3% market share against competing company Dogma, aka Sony. Bit of an unflattering way to depict the success or lack thereof of your own company in a game you've made yourself, Sega. In the game, the stress and pressure of the industry has morphed developers into subhuman monsters locked away behind a giant blast door, and it's up to you to fight them with a turn-based system that involves hurling insults at them about their poor work and bad relationship skills. The enemies are a glorious mixture of weird creatures, cutouts of actual developers, and variations on Karate Kid's Daniel LaRusso. For some reason, there's a whole load of cameos from Sega classics as well. Oh, and a boss fight against an ever-evolving Mega Drive unit too. And of course, the thinly veiled dig at Tom Kalinske, named Special Task Force Director Cool, a cocky American who almost scuppers their plans for saving the company. Sit tight everyone, 2025 is not far away. 6 years to go before we can watch this all unfold in real life. Number 3, Sega's forgotten first console. While the Sega Mega Drive was the main breakthrough for Western audiences, and its predecessor the Master System had some decent success in Europe, there was another console that came before, and it just so happened to launch on the exact same day as the Nintendo Famicom. Sega's SG-1000 launched in 1983, far away from the western reaches of the USA or Europe, in Japan and Australia only. It was a true underdog compared to Nintendo's more powerful hardware, but it had a respectable start, selling 160,000 units in the first year. This far outperformed Sega's projection of 50,000 and was put down to its stronger early library of 21 titles compared to only 9 Famicom games. Sadly though, the gap inevitably widened in the coming years, with the SG-1000's 2 million lifetime sales eventually dwarfed by Nintendo's 61 million NES sales worldwide. Some highlights for the short-lived system though include Flicky, Pitfall 2, the dubiously named clone of Donkey Kong called Congo Bongo, and Sonic developer Yuji Naka's even more dubiously named debut, Girl's Garden. I don't think we can show footage of that on YouTube, we better move on. Number 2, the Mega Drive's surprisingly high sales. The familiar story is that Sega were the brave underdogs who never quite beat Nintendo in the grand scheme of things. And, well, cold hard numbers don't lie. It's generally accepted that Nintendo sold 49.1 million SNES units, but numbers for Sega's Mega Drive are more debatable, ranging from a conservative but respectable 29 million to highs of 49.6 million, which, according to our calculations, is, hang on, just extrapolate the integer and divide by the hypotenuse. Well, that's more than Nintendo! Now, it's hard to know whether this top estimate can really be believed, but one thing is for certain. While Japan's die-hard Nintendo loyalty obviously skewed the global figures in their favour, the US market was a much closer call, with around 20 million sales apiece. And in Europe, the Mega Drive even outdid the SNES by 4 million, Don't get me started on Brazil. They practically worship Sega like a technological god! The Brazilian releases of the Master System and Mega Drive outsold Nintendo by a country mile, thanks to a shrewd licensing agreement with local toy manufacturer Tectoy, whose loyalty to Sega meant they refused to stock Nintendo products and are still producing the consoles even now. Honestly, the sales figures are up there in the Brazilians. It'll come as shocking news to many that the production of the consoles is still going on over there. If only games were still being made for the Dreamcast and Mega Drive today. Number 1, games are still being made for the Dreamcast and Mega Drive today. We hope you're sitting down and have your accident-proof trousers on for this news, because the Sega consoles you thought were long gone are still alive. The lies have gone on long enough, so it's time to dust off the old console and spread the good word that you can still get brand new releases like Gunlord, Rush Rush Rally Racing, Ducks 1 and 1.5, and Pia Solar and the Great Architects. Okay, look, they might not look like blockbuster hits, but these homebrew indie titles really aren't too shabby, and it goes to show just how well the tech behind the Dreamcast still holds up today. People are still at it on the Mega Drive too, with games like the beautifully retro Tanglewood showing that nostalgia can be a powerful weapon in the hands of determined programmers. Ironically though, the factor that made this prolonged life possible also contributed towards the death of Sega's console era. Yes, piracy. Haha, yar, avast! The Dreamcast was notoriously easy to pirate games for, requiring just a few free programs and a CDR of the Dreamcast disc image. Eventually, one fed-up departing employee even left emulation instructions addressed to famous piracy group Echelon on copies of Sega Smash Pack Volume 1. God, that's terrible. Why would you do that? But fear not, because all's well that ends well. Teamwork can make the Dreamcast. Don't Stop Believing by Journey. I don't know. There's a nice message in here somewhere. That's the end. So that's our list, and here we are wiser for the experience, wondering where we can pick up an affordable Brazilian Dreamcast console and an imported copy of SEGAGAGA. There's plenty more lore we haven't delved into, so if you have any interesting Sega stories we've missed, let us know in the comments below. You can follow myself and TripleJump on Twitter here, and if you want to support the things you enjoy, then check out the rewards on our Patreon. Finally, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I've been Peter from TripleJump, and thanks for watching.